What happens when Machine Gun Kelly walks onto a live daytime talk show expecting a conversation about music, celebrity culture, and media criticism, only for the discussion to spiral into one of the most uncomfortable on-air clashes the audience has seen in years after Whoopi Goldberg challenges him over controversy, fame, and public behavior in front of a national audience. What starts as a casual interview quickly becomes a tense debate filled with interruptions, sharp responses, awkward silence, and a studio audience that can't decide whose side they're on. Make sure to subscribe to Talk Show Fallout, and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The applause is loud before Machine Gun Kelly even reaches the table. The hosts are smiling, the crowd is energetic, and the atmosphere feels light at first. MGK walks out wearing a dark jacket, rings covering both hands, greeting the audience with quick waves before sitting down at the panel. Whoopi leans back in her chair with that familiar expression she gives guests when she's already planning to challenge them before the interview even starts. "Good to have you here," Whoopi says while the audience settles down. "Good to be here," MGK replies with a grin. "I'm surprised y'all invited me back." The audience laughs lightly. "Well," Whoopi says, smirking, "you always give people something to talk about." "That's one way to put it." Another host jumps in. "You've got the new project out. People are talking about the tour again, and honestly it feels like every week there's another headline about you." MGK shrugs. "That's kind of the deal now. You make music, and suddenly people care more about your personal life than the album." The crowd claps a little at that. Whoopi folds her hands. "But isn't some of that because of the way you present yourself? You've built an image around controversy." The tone changes slightly. Not aggressive yet, but noticeably sharper. MGK looks at her for a second before answering. "I think people say that whenever someone doesn't fit what they're comfortable with." Or, Whoopi responds quickly, "People react when someone seems to constantly provoke attention." A few audience members murmur. MGK smiles, but it's tighter now. "See, that's interesting. Because when actors or television personalities say wild things, people call them outspoken. Musicians do it. Suddenly we're dangerous." One host nods carefully while another avoids eye contact entirely. Whoopi jumps in immediately. "Nobody said dangerous. You implied it." "I didn't." "You kinda did." The audience reacts with that nervous mix of laughter and tension that daytime talk shows thrive on. Whoopi leans forward. "No, what I'm saying is that there's a responsibility when millions of young people are listening to you." MGK responds almost instantly. Every celebrity says that until people disagree with them politically or personally. Then suddenly responsibility becomes selective. A louder reaction comes from the audience this time. One co-host tries to soften things. "I think what Whoopi means is..." "No, let him answer," Whoopi says, still staring directly at MGK. MGK nods slowly. "I appreciate that." There's a pause that feels longer than it actually is. Whoopi finally says, "You've openly embraced chaos as part of your public image." Chaos according to who? According to public perception. Public perception changes every week, MGK fires back. Half the time it's created by media panels exactly like this one. The audience lets out an audible, "Oh." One host quickly laughs nervously. "Well, all right then." Whoopi doesn't laugh. "So now it's our fault?" she asks. "No," MGK replies calmly. "But media loves building people up just so they can act shocked later when those same people stay authentic." Whoopi raises an eyebrow. Authentic is an interesting word. What's that supposed to mean? It means sometimes people confuse attention with authenticity. The crowd reacts again. MGK sits back slightly, crossing his arms now. "See, this is why artists don't trust interviews anymore. Because someone asks difficult questions? No, because every conversation becomes moral judgment disguised as concern." The room gets quieter. One co-host attempts to redirect. "Let's talk about the music for a second because the new sound." But Whoopi cuts in again. "No, because I actually want to understand this," she says. "You say people judge you unfairly, but you've willingly participated in public drama for years." MGK nods. "Sure. And television hosts profit off conflict every single day. That doesn't make them morally superior." The audience erupts louder this time. Whoopi stares at him silently for a moment. "Oh, okay," she says slowly. "So now we're attacking the hosts." "I'm not attacking anybody. I'm pointing out hypocrisy." One audience member claps loudly while others boo slightly. The tension becomes impossible to ignore now. Another host jumps in carefully. "I think both sides are talking about accountability in entertainment," MGK interrupts. No, because accountability always gets aimed at musicians and younger celebrities. Meanwhile, TV personalities can say brutal things about people every morning and call it discussion. Whoopi laughs once, but it's not friendly. You came ready today. I came honest. Well, honesty without self-awareness can become arrogance. MGK leans forward immediately. And criticism without accountability becomes bullying. The audience explodes again. Even the co-hosts look stunned now. Whoopi takes a breath. Nobody here is bullying you. Not me personally. But media culture absolutely does. You're a grown man with fame, money, and millions of fans. And somehow, that means public disrespect is acceptable. You call it disrespect. Other people call it criticism. MGK shakes his head. Criticism is about actions. Media turns people into caricatures. One co-host quietly says, "That's actually true sometimes." Whoopi glances sideways at her. The audience notices it immediately. MGK notices too. "That silence right there," he says, pointing lightly toward the panel. "That's the problem. Everybody knows entertainment media crosses lines, but nobody wants to admit it on camera." Whoopi responds firmly. "No, what I'm not going to do is pretend celebrities are helpless victims. I never said helpless." "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying some of y'all profit off tearing people apart while pretending it's social commentary." A massive audience reaction follows. One producer somewhere backstage can almost be felt panicking through the cameras as the energy completely changes. Whoopi folds her arms now. "You know what I think? I think sometimes celebrities want praise for being provocative, but can't handle pushback when it comes." MGK laughs in disbelief. "I've handled pushback my entire career." "Then why are you so defensive?" "Because there's a difference between discussion and condescension." The audience reacts loudly again. One co-host tries laughing it off. "This is getting spicy." MGK glances toward her briefly. "I'm calm." Whoopi responds immediately. "You don't sound calm." "Because I'm direct?" "No, because you sound angry." MGK shakes his head slowly. "See, that's another thing. When artists defend themselves confidently, people immediately call it anger." "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you implied." The audience starts clapping again, louder than before. Whoopi looks toward the crowd for a second before turning back to him. "You know, part of this business is learning how to hear uncomfortable opinions. And part of this business," MGK says quickly, "should be hosts learning they're not automatically right because they have a microphone." The crowd erupts. One co-host covers her mouth in shock. Another host whispers, "Oh my God." Whoopi stays composed externally, but her expression changes completely now. "So this is what you came here to do?" "No. But I'm also not going to sit here and act fake polite while people take shots at me under the label of conversation." Whoopi leans back slowly. "Nobody invited you here to be attacked." MGK responds instantly. "Then stop framing everything like a courtroom." The audience reaction becomes split, some clapping hard, others booing. For the first time since the interview started, the atmosphere feels genuinely unpredictable. One host finally says, "We're going to take a quick break." But before the cameras cut away, Whoopi says one final line quietly into the tension. "You know, being challenged isn't the same thing as being destroyed." MGK looks directly back at her. "Depends who's doing the challenging." The audience gasps loudly just as the music starts playing for commercial break. The second the show returns from commercial, the atmosphere feels completely different. The applause is weaker now, uncertain, like the audience is trying to figure out whether they're watching a daytime interview or a live argument that nobody backstage can control anymore. The camera pans across the table. Whoopi Goldberg is sitting straighter now, hands folded tightly together, while Machine Gun Kelly leans back in his chair, expression calmer than before but noticeably guarded. The other hosts exchange quick glances that viewers instantly pick up on. One co-host tries to restart the conversation carefully. "We're back with Machine Gun Kelly," she says with an uneasy smile. "And things got a little passionate before the break." The audience laughs nervously. MGK smirks slightly. "A little?" Even a few audience members clap at that. Whoopi jumps in immediately. "Nobody here has a problem with passion. We do this every day. But there's also a difference between debate and accusing people of bad intentions." MGK nods once. "Fair." "Okay," Whoopi says. "So let's actually unpack this because I think viewers are probably confused about what exactly upset you." MGK takes a breath before answering. What upset me is this idea that artists have to sit here smiling while panels of people psychoanalyze them like they know who they are personally. But public behavior becomes public conversation, Whoopi replies. Sure, but there's a line between discussing behavior and acting morally above somebody. The audience reacts again. One host carefully says, I think social media made that worse for everybody though. Exactly, MGK says quickly. Everything becomes performance now. Outrage gets ratings. Conflict gets clips. Whoopi points toward him slightly. And you participate in that too. Of course I do. I'm in entertainment. But at least I admit it. The crowd lets out another collective, oh. Whoopi narrows her eyes slightly. You think we don't admit it? I think daytime television pretends conflict is accidental. One co-host bursts out laughing from pure discomfort. Oh wow, she says under her breath. Whoopi stays focused. You know what's interesting? Every celebrity who comes here says they want honest conversations until the conversation becomes uncomfortable. MGK answers immediately. No, honest conversation is fine. Condescending conversation is different. You keep using that word. Because it fits. The audience claps loudly again. One host tries changing the direction. You've talked before about struggling with public perception. Has that gotten harder over the years? MGK relaxes slightly at the question. Definitely. Especially now. People don't just dislike celebrities anymore. They want ownership over them. Everybody thinks. They're entitled to constant explanations. Whoopi interrupts again. Well, fans are the reason celebrities have careers. Absolutely. Fans aren't the problem. Then who is? MGK glances toward the panel briefly before answering carefully. I think media culture creates simplified versions of people because complexity doesn't trend. The audience quiets down a little. Whoopi responds. Or maybe audiences just respond to patterns. MGK laughs softly. See? That right there. What? You're already framing me like a case study instead of a person. Don't do that, Whoopi says firmly. Don't turn this into victimhood. I'm not a victim. Then stop acting attacked every time somebody pushes back. MGK leans forward again. And maybe stop acting like questioning media behavior is some crime. A louder reaction breaks out across the studio. One co-host raises both hands jokingly. I need popcorn for this. The audience laughs, finally breaking some tension. But Whoopi doesn't back off. You know what bothers me, she says. There's this trend now where celebrities want complete freedom to say whatever they want publicly, but the second people respond critically, suddenly the media is toxic. MGK answers quickly. Criticism is fine. Dehumanization isn't. Who dehumanized you? The internet. Headlines. Commentary shows. You're talking very generally now. Because it's bigger than one person. Whoopi shakes her head. I think some celebrities blame the media because they don't want accountability for the image they created. MGK's smile disappears completely now. That's easy to say from this side of the table. What does that mean? It means people in these seats control narratives more than they admit. The audience erupts again. One co-host quietly mutters, "This is intense." Whoopi responds immediately. No, artists control narratives too. You post things online. You give interviews. You perform publicly. Right, MGK says. But there's still a difference between expressing yourself and being reduced to clickbait. Another audience reaction. Whoopi leans in slightly. You keep talking like you're powerless. MGK shakes his head instantly. No, I'm talking like I'm tired. That line changes the mood for a moment. Even the audience gets quieter. One host softly asks, tired of what? Tired of everybody pretending celebrities aren't human anymore, MGK replies. People talk about artists online like we're fictional characters designed for entertainment 24/7. Whoopi answers calmly this time. That comes with fame. And maybe fame shouldn't cost basic empathy. A few audience members clap. Whoopi pauses before responding. Empathy goes both ways, though. MGK nods slowly. I agree. Then why does it feel like you only want understanding for yourself? The audience immediately reacts. MGK exhales through his nose and shakes his head slightly. That's not what I'm saying. Then explain it. I'm saying there's hypocrisy in entertainment culture. Certain celebrities get labeled complicated, and others get labeled disasters. Based on behavior. Based on branding. Whoopi laughs lightly. Now you sound like a publicist. No, MGK says sharply. I sound like somebody who's lived through it. The tension spikes again. One co-host quickly steps in. Do you think social media amplified that pressure? Absolutely, MGK says. People don't even wait for facts anymore. They just want moments. Viral outrage. Public humiliation. Whoopi immediately says. And yet controversy helped your career. MGK looks directly at her. You think I wanted every bad moment in my life turned into entertainment? You benefited from attention. That doesn't mean it's healthy. The audience claps louder this time. One host nods slowly. That's actually true for a lot of celebrities. Whoopi glances sideways again. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm pushing back on is the idea that public figures somehow deserve protection from criticism. No, MGK says. Public figures deserve fairness. And who decides what's fair? Not outrage culture. The crowd reacts instantly. Whoopi folds her hands again. Okay, but here's where I think people struggle with you specifically. Sometimes it feels like you intentionally provoke reactions and then complain about reactions. MGK laughs in disbelief again. See, that's the narrative. What narrative? That I'm some chaos machine instead of a real person. Public image matters. Public image gets manipulated. You think everybody's manipulating you? No, MGK says firmly. I think media rewards oversimplification because it's profitable. The audience applause gets louder and more divided at the same time. One co-host looks toward the camera awkwardly. Twitter is going to have a field day with this. MGK laughs briefly. Twitter already decided how everybody feels before the interview even started. Whoopi responds instantly. Now that part one agree with. The audience laughs and claps. For a split second, the tension softens. But then Whoopi adds, still doesn't mean celebrities can avoid criticism. MGK nods. And it still doesn't mean hosts can pretend they're neutral. The crowd explodes again. One audience member literally stands up clapping before sitting back down. Whoopi stares at MGK for a long second before speaking. You really think this show pretends to be neutral? I think shows like this pretend personal opinions are objective truth. One co-host says, okay, that's not entirely fair. MGK turns toward her calmly. You all have influence. Massive influence. But sometimes that influence gets treated like moral authority. Whoopi responds immediately. Experience creates perspective. And fame creates ego for everybody. MGK fires back. The audience loses it again. Even some crew members off camera can be heard reacting faintly. Whoopi laughs once in disbelief. You came in loaded today. No, MGK says quietly. I came in honest because most interviews are fake. Fake how? Everybody pretending not to judge each other while actively judging each other. The audience claps hard again. One co-host says carefully, I think viewers probably appreciate the honesty even if it's uncomfortable. Whoopi sighs slightly. I don't mind uncomfortable. I've been doing this too long to mind uncomfortable. MGK nods once. Then we probably understand each other more than it seems. That line catches everyone slightly off guard. Whoopi studies him carefully. Maybe. But understanding somebody doesn't mean excusing everything. MGK responds calmly. And criticism doesn't mean superiority. The audience reacts loudly again. The tension now feels less explosive and more deeply personal, like neither side wants to fully back down anymore. One producer off camera signals something, and a host quickly says, we've got to squeeze in one more break. But before the music starts, Whoopi says one last thing. You know what I think this really is? I think your frustrated people don't see you the way you see yourself. MGK looks directly at her. No, he replies quietly. I'm frustrated people like you decide who everybody else should see. The audience gasps loudly as the cameras cut to commercial once again. When the show comes back from the second commercial break, the energy inside the studio feels heavier than before. The audience applause is still there, but it sounds more cautious now, like people realize they're watching something that has gone far beyond a normal celebrity interview. The camera cuts back to Whoopi Goldberg and Machine Gun Kelly sitting across from each other with expressions that are calmer on the surface, but far more intense underneath. The other hosts look visibly nervous now, especially after the last exchange before the break started trending online almost instantly. One co-host forces a smile. All right, we are back. A few audience members laugh awkwardly. She continues. I think this might be one of the most honest conversations we've had on this show in a while. The audience applauds lightly. Whoopi responds first. Honest is good. Productive is better. MGK nods slowly. I agree with that. There's a brief silence before another host carefully asks, "Do you think part of this issue is generational?" Because younger celebrities seem to have a very different relationship with media than older generations did. MGK answers immediately. Absolutely. Older entertainment culture was built around gatekeepers. Now everybody has direct access to public opinion 24 hours a day. Whoopi jumps in. And sometimes that direct access creates recklessness. Or transparency, MGK replies. Not always, but more than before. The audience reacts quietly. Whoopi leans forward slightly. See, this is where I think you lose people. You talk about transparency, but sometimes what celebrities call authenticity is just impulsiveness broadcast publicly. MGK smiles faintly. That sounds like somebody who grew up in an era where public image was controlled by studios and PR teams. The crowd lets out another, "Oh." Whoopi laughs shortly. And that sounds like somebody who thinks saying every thought publicly is bravery. I never said every thought should be public. Then what exactly are you defending? MGK pauses before answering. The right to be imperfect without being permanently reduced to your worst moments. The audience claps loudly at that line. Even one of the co-hosts nods slowly. Whoopi notices it immediately. Nobody's reducing you to one moment. That's literally what internet culture does. But people also remember patterns. MGK shakes his head. No, people remember narratives. Same thing sometimes. No, MGK replies firmly. Patterns are real. Narratives are edited. The crowd reacts loudly again. One host quietly says, "That's a strong point." Whoopi crosses her arms slightly. You keep talking like media is this giant machine controlling people. It is a machine, and yet you use it constantly, because nobody in entertainment can survive without it. Then maybe don't act above it. MGK laughs once in disbelief. See, that's the thing. The second somebody criticizes the system while participating in it, people call them hypocrites. Well, the audience laughs as Whoopi shrugs. MGK points jokingly toward her. Exactly. Even Whoopi smiles briefly. For the first time all interview, the tension breaks for a second. But it doesn't last long. One co-host carefully changes direction. You've both talked about accountability in different ways. Do you think celebrity culture has become too harsh overall? Whoopi answers first this time. Yes and no. I think people are quicker to judge now, but I also think celebrities have more power than ever before. MGK nods slightly. I agree with the power part. What I disagree with is how selective public outrage becomes. What does that mean? Whoopi asks. It means some people get endless second chances and others get branded forever. The audience murmurs. Whoopi responds calmly. That depends on behavior. No, MGK says immediately. It depends on popularity. A louder reaction spreads across the studio. One host looks toward the audience. Y'all are really invested today. MGK continues before anyone interrupts. People forgive celebrities they emotionally connect with. Everybody else becomes disposable. Whoopi shakes her head. That sounds cynical. That sounds accurate. Another audience eruption follows. Whoopi waits a moment before speaking again. Okay, but let me challenge you on something directly. MGK nods. Go ahead. You say you want fairness. But have you ever considered that some criticism toward you comes from concern, not malice? MGK pauses longer this time. Maybe some of it, he admits. But concern gets weaponized really fast in entertainment. How? People pretend they're worried about celebrities while enjoying watching them fall apart. The audience suddenly quiets down. That line lands harder than the others. One co-host softly says, "That's unfortunately true sometimes." Whoopi looks thoughtful for the first time all conversation. You think audiences enjoy destruction? Sometimes, yeah, MGK replies honestly. Especially online. People say they care about mental health while turning human mistakes into memes 5 minutes later. A few audience members clap softly. Whoopi doesn't interrupt immediately this time. Instead she asks, so what do you think celebrities owe the public? MGK answers quickly. Honesty when possible. Accountability when necessary. But not constant access to their humanity. One host tilts her head. What do you mean by that? I mean, people want celebrities emotionally exposed all the time now. Every apology has to be public. Every mistake has to be discussed forever. Whoopi responds, that's because influence matters. And exploitation doesn't? The crowd reacts instantly again. Whoopi sighs. You really think interviews like this are exploitation? MGK looks around the studio before answering carefully. No, I think entertainment turns conflict into content because conflict keeps attention. One co-host laughs nervously. Well, ratings do exist. The audience laughs too. Whoopi smirks slightly. At least somebody's honest. MGK points toward her lightly. That's my entire point. But honesty without responsibility can become chaos. And control without self-awareness becomes arrogance. The audience explodes again. Whoopi stares at him silently. That line sounded rehearsed, she says. MGK laughs genuinely for the first time. Nah, that one just came out. Even the audience laughs harder now. But the tension underneath never fully disappears. One host jumps in quickly. You know what's interesting? I think both of you are actually talking about the same thing from different sides. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. How so? You both think media affects people deeply. You just disagree on who holds the most responsibility. The audience applauds. MGK nods slowly. That's fair. Whoopi considers it for a second. Maybe. The co-host continues carefully. Because honestly, viewers can feel when celebrities are being fake. But they can also feel when media coverage crosses the line into personal attacks. That's true, MGK says. Whoopi finally nods slightly too. I'll agree with that. The audience reacts warmly for the first time in a while. But then Whoopi adds, what I still don't agree with is this idea that public figures are powerless victims of media. MGK responds immediately. And I never said powerless. Then what are you saying? I'm saying fame doesn't erase humanity. The crowd applauds loudly again. Whoopi leans back in her chair. You know, you're a lot calmer now than when this started. MGK smirks slightly. Because now we're actually talking instead of analyzing me. Oh please, Whoopi says, laughing lightly. You analyze us too. True. The audience laughs. One host says jokingly, progress. But then Whoopi asks one more question that changes the atmosphere again. Let me ask you something honestly, she says. Do you think sometimes your image overshadows your talent? The audience instantly reacts. MGK's expression changes again. What do you mean by image? He asks carefully. I mean controversy. Headlines. Public drama. MGK nods slowly. Sometimes, yeah. The room gets quieter because nobody expected that answer. Whoopi looks surprised too. MGK continues. But that's also part of the problem. People stop engaging with art and start engaging with personalities. Whoopi responds, that's been true forever though. Not like now. What's different now? Now everybody's permanently performing, MGK says. Celebrities. Hosts. Fans. Everybody. The audience becomes noticeably quieter again. One co-host says softly, that's actually kind of depressing. Because it's true, MGK replies. Whoopi studies him for a long moment. You know, I still think you enjoy provoking reactions. MGK smiles slightly. And I think television enjoys reacting to people who provoke reactions. The audience erupts one more time. Even the hosts laugh despite themselves. Whoopi shakes her head slowly. You really won't let that go. Because it matters. Or because you like fighting. MGK pauses. Then he says calmly, no. I just got tired of pretending uncomfortable conversations aren't real. The audience applauds loudly. One producer off-camera signals they're almost out of time. A co-host quickly says, we've only got a few minutes left. Whoopi looks toward MGK one more time before speaking carefully. Well, whether we agree or not, I'll say this. You definitely showed up willing to say exactly what you think. MGK nods once. So did you. The audience reacts again. Whoopi smirks slightly. That's why this job still works. MGK smiles faintly back. Or why it keeps causing problems. The audience bursts into laughter and applause as the cameras slowly pull back. But everyone can already feel that the final segment is going to decide whether this interview ends respectfully or completely falls apart on live television. The final segment begins with a different kind of energy entirely. The tension is still there, but now it feels less explosive and more personal. Like everybody at the table understands they've crossed into a conversation far deeper than the producers originally planned. The applause starts again as the cameras return live, but this time the audience sounds emotionally invested rather than simply entertained. Some people are cheering loudly for Machine Gun Kelly, while others clap harder for Whoopi Goldberg. The division in the room is obvious now. One co-host exhales dramatically as everyone laughs lightly. Well, she says, this has definitely been a morning. The audience laughs and applauds. Whoopi smiles faintly. Nobody can accuse us of being boring. MGK laughs too. Fair enough. For the first time all interview, the atmosphere softens naturally instead of awkwardly. Another host jumps in carefully. I think one reason people are reacting so strongly to this conversation is because both of you represent very different eras of entertainment. Whoopi nods slowly. That's true. MGK agrees too. Definitely. The host continues. But viewers are probably seeing something bigger underneath all this. This idea of who controls celebrity narratives now. Whoopi folds her hands together again. The truth is nobody fully controls it anymore. That's the scary part, MGK replies. The audience murmurs in agreement. Whoopi looks toward him. You really believe fame is harder now than it used to be? MGK pauses before answering. I think access changed everything. Before, celebrities could disappear for a while and still be human privately. Now everybody expects constant performance. Whoopi nods slightly. That part one actually understand. The audience reacts immediately because it's the first moment that sounds like genuine agreement instead of debate. MGK notices too. See? We finally found common ground. Whoopi laughs softly. Don't get too excited. The crowd laughs harder. One co-host smiles. Honestly, I think people at home are surprised this conversation didn't completely explode. MGK raises an eyebrow jokingly. There's still time. Even Whoopi laughs at that. But then she becomes serious again. You know, she says carefully, I do want to say something directly because I think some viewers may misunderstand where I'm coming from. The audience quiets immediately. Whoopi continues. I push people because that's my job. I ask uncomfortable questions because audiences deserve honesty. That doesn't mean I hate the people sitting here. MGK listens quietly this time. And I don't think celebrities are monsters, Whoopi adds. But I also think fame changes people in ways they don't always recognize themselves. MGK nods slowly before answering. That's fair. But I think media changes too. People with platforms stop realizing how powerful their words become. The audience applauds again. Whoopi responds calmly. You're not wrong about that. That line gets one of the biggest reactions of the entire interview. Even the co-hosts look surprised. MGK leans back slightly, clearly noticing the shift too. I think people just want honesty without humiliation. Whoopi replies, and audiences want accountability without fake apologies. Another loud audience reaction follows. One host says quietly, that's probably the most accurate thing said all morning. The crowd laughs and claps. The conversation finally begins sounding less like a fight and more like two people who strongly disagree, but understand each other more than they expected. Still, the tension never fully disappears. Whoopi suddenly asks, do you regret anything you said today? The audience immediately reacts again. MGK smiles faintly. No, the crowd erupts. Whoopi laughs once. I figured that. But, MGK continues, I probably could have said some things calmer. One co-host jokes, probably? The audience laughs loudly. MGK grins. All right, definitely. Whoopi smirks slightly. Growth. Then she answers the question herself before anyone asks. And no, she says, I don't regret challenging you either. MGK nods respectfully. I didn't expect you to. The audience applauds again. One host looks toward both of them. You know what's funny? Social media has probably already decided who won this conversation. MGK laughs. Oh, absolutely. Whoopi shakes her head. That's another problem nowadays. Everything becomes a competition instead of a discussion. Exactly, MGK replies instantly. That's what I've been trying to say. Whoopi points toward him jokingly. Don't start acting like we completely agree now. The audience laughs again. But then the host reading from a tablet suddenly reacts. Oh wow, she says. People online are going crazy right now. The crowd cheers immediately. What are they saying? Another host asks. She scrolls while laughing nervously. Half the internet says MGK destroyed the panel, and the other half says Whoopi held her ground. The audience erupts again. MGK smiles. Sounds about right. Whoopi shrugs. That's television. Another co-host reads a few comments aloud. One viewer wrote, this is the most real conversation daytime TV has had in years. Audience applause. Another comment says, finally somebody challenged celebrity culture and media culture at the same time. More applause. Then another host reads one that makes everyone laugh. Here's one. The producers definitely needed aspirin during those commercial breaks. Even Whoopi breaks into real laughter at that. That producer probably quit halfway through, MGK jokes. The audience loses it again. But the tone shifts one final time when Whoopi says something quieter. You know what I hope people take from this? The studio settles immediately. That disagreement doesn't have to mean hatred. The audience applauds softly. MGK nods slowly. I agree with that. Whoopi continues. People are so used to screaming online now that they forget real conversations can actually be uncomfortable. And necessary, MGK adds. The audience claps louder again. One co-host says, honestly, this conversation probably went farther than anybody expected. Whoopi responds dryly, including legal. The entire audience bursts into laughter. MGK shakes his head smiling. I knew this was going to be weird the second. I walked out here. And yet you stayed, Whoopi says. Yeah, MGK replies calmly. Because fake interviews are boring. The crowd cheers loudly. Whoopi points at him again. See, there you go provoking people one last time. MGK laughs. Couldn't help it. One producer off-camera signals that the segment is ending soon. The hosts begin wrapping things up, but the atmosphere in the studio still feels electric. Audience members are whispering to each other, some clapping randomly between comments, others already pulling out phones to post reactions online before the show even officially ends. Another host says, I guarantee clips from this conversation are going viral within the hour. Within the minute, MGK replies. He isn't wrong. As the final moments approach, Whoopi turns toward him one last time. For what it's worth, she says, I respect people who are willing to sit in discomfort instead of running from it. MGK looks genuinely surprised for a second before nodding. Same to you. The audience gives a long round of applause. The tension that defined the interview never fully disappeared, but by the end, it transformed into something more complicated. Two strong personalities refusing to completely back down while still acknowledging each other's perspective. As the cameras begin pulling away, the hosts start saying their usual closing lines, but the audience energy keeps building instead of fading. By the time the episode ends, social media is already exploding with clips, reaction videos, hashtags, and arguments over who handled the debate better. Some viewers accuse MGK of disrespecting daytime television, while others praise him for directly challenging media hypocrisy on live TV. Supporters of Whoopi argue that she held him accountable without backing down, while critics claim the panel underestimated how prepared he was to push back publicly. Entertainment blogs immediately begin posting headlines about the clash. Reaction channels break down every interruption, every audience reaction, and every sharp exchange. Short clips titled MGK Fires Back at Whoopi and Whoopi Refuses to Back Down start circulating across every platform within hours. According to backstage reports, producers were reportedly nervous during every commercial break because nobody was completely sure where the conversation would go next. Some staff members believed the tension made for incredible television, while others thought the interview came dangerously close to spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, fans online continued debating the biggest moment of the entire exchange. When MGK accused media personalities of shaping public narratives while pretending to stay objective. That single moment becomes the clip shared more than any other. By the evening, major entertainment pages are already calling it one of the most intense daytime talk show confrontations of the year. And strangely enough, despite all the tension, neither side ever fully lost control, which only makes viewers argue about it even more. One thing becomes absolutely clear by the end of the day. People may disagree about who was right, but almost everyone agrees they couldn't stop watching. And now we want to hear from you. Who do you think made the stronger points during the debate? Did Machine Gun Kelly go too far? Or was he right to challenge the hosts directly? And did Whoopi Goldberg hold the conversation together? Or did the panel underestimate how tense things would become live on air? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Talk Show Fallout for more real talk show stories.